Hello everyone, and today we are back for another Loomian Legacy Top 5 video, and we're going to be talking about the top 5 Pivot Loomians in all of Loomian Legacy. I made this list twice in the past, once in 2022 and once in 2023, so this is the 2024 version of this list. With that out of the way, let's head right onto this list. So number 5 onto this list is going to be Falkyrie. Now, Falkyrie is a very interesting Loomian because it's a Loomian that has a very questionable defensive typing, but it walls the meta Loomians like Tyrannox and Glissadia. But there is actually another thing that makes Falkyrie really good. It has the move Flash and Flay. And not only does it have a high ranged attack stat with the Awakening boosted Flash and Flay, but it also has a move called Radiant Forecast. You can click a Radiant Forecast and then pivot out into your Dark-type Loomian, and you can gain a whole lot of momentum because Light-Dark offensively is one of the best combos in the entire game. If a plant type swaps into your Dark type, it takes the Dark type attack. And if you go into something that is resistant to Dark, the Radiant Forecast can destroy it. And that is ultimately set up by Falkyrie by clicking a Radiant Forecast and Flash and Fleeing out. Not to mention that Falkyrie not only hits hard, but it also has great bulk, especially on the range side, and a healing move in Rejuvenate. That makes Falkyrie a really good Pivot Loomian. It's a pretty good bulky offensive Pivot Loomian, which I don't think there's any other Loomians that could be used in this role, which is awesome. And that's why Falkyrie is number 5 on this list. Number 4 onto this list is going to be Zulong. Now, this doesn't mean that Zulong is a better Loomian than Falkyrie, but I think Zulong is a better Pivot Loomian, mainly because of the mix of Zip Zap and Ancient Roar. This is probably the fastest Pivot Loomian on this list. It has Fire Breath to hit Himbers and Tyrexes, it has Ancient Roar to lower the attacks on both sides, which is good, and it has Zip Zap to do some extra damage. It has Elemental Burst as its main damaging move, which is good, and Ancient Electric's a pretty good offensive typing when you combine Fire Breath into the occasion. The thing that makes Zulong such a good Pivot Loomian is the fact that not only it's a good late game cleaner, but it's also a really good lead. It's probably the best of the Boots pivoters. There's Ikazune that does a little more damage, but it's a little slower. There's Land Torch as well, but with Land Torch, you're mainly clicking the move Flare instead of Flash and Flee. Zulong is probably the best of the Pivot Loomians, and while it doesn't hit as hard as Land Torch, it's the fastest of them. You can run very smart boots, and you can even run a mix set, so you can actually hit Gas Stroke on its weaker side. That's what makes Zulong such a good pivoter, and Ancient Roar is almost guaranteed other than Staunch Loomians. And that's what makes Zulong a number 4 Pivot Loomian on this list. Number 3 onto this list is going to be Cleone. Now, Cleone is already one of the best Loomians in all of Loomian Legacy. It has amazing range bulk, hits extremely hard with stratagem, has a healing move and setup. It even has Tsunami to actually hit electric type super effectively, which is awesome. But the thing that makes Cleone an awesome Pivot Loomian is Dissipate. And since Cleone is so bulky, you're almost always able to get a Dissipate off. And since Dissipate is minus priority, your Wall Breaker is always going to come in without getting hit at all, which is awesome. And while Cleone doesn't have any abilities like Power Napper, it does have Repugnant, making it so you can actually survive chomping moves really well. So you can also be a pretty good melee tank as well on top of that. This Loomian is awesome, and while it does have 6 weaknesses, its total bulk overall makes up for it. And the fact that it has Dissipate just really helps. It's a valuable member on the team, especially when you set up a Wall Breaker to win. And that's what makes Cleone a top 3 Pivot Loomian in all of Loomian Legacy, even though it doesn't have a damaging pivot move like Flash and Flee, Fade Away, or support move like Baffle. That's what makes Cleone so good. Number 2 onto this list is going to be Luminami. Everyone knows how OP Luminami is, and honestly, I think everyone knows who the top 2 spots are. Flash and Flee, Power Napper. They work so well together, and when you combine that with Luminami's pretty good coverage and awesome bulk, makes Luminami one of the best Pivot Loomians in all of Loomian Legacy. You soak a hit well, you go last, and you flash and flee out into your wall breakers that take no damage. Kind of like Cleone. But unlike Cleone, you have Power Napper that gives you free HP back without having to do anything. All you have to do is swap out, and Luminami gets free HP back. I will say it is kind of OP, and I think they should nerf Power Napper to give it like, I don't know, maybe 15% or 20% of your HP back per switch. But still, it's really overpowered, and it really helps because you don't have to waste your energy on a healing move. Not to mention that Luminami also has decent attacking stats and pretty good coverage, meaning that if you can hit something super effectively, you're going to two-shot most Loomians with a Luminami, which is awesome. This thing is definitely one of the most reliable Loomians in all of Loomian Legacy, and it's so easy to put on a team. But the reason why it isn't number one is because I think the number one Pivot Loomian is a little bit better, and that's why Luminami's number 2 on the list. Honorable mention number 1 is going to be Ikazune. In the Zulong segment, I mentioned Ikazune, and this thing is still a very good Pivot Loomian. Has Flash and Flee and Zip-Zap Pivot. Not to mention, it has Fire Breath for the plant types as well. The reason why Ikazune is not on the list is because I think Zulong is a little better at the moment. Not to mention that Ikazune is a little slower, so that's why Ikazune is not on this list, but it's still a very good Pivot Loomian. Honorable mention number 2 is Lantorch, and honestly, Lantorch is a pretty good Flash and Flee Loomian, and also Fade Away as well. The only reason why I don't have it on the list is because most of the time, Lantorches are clicking Flare. So they're not clicking Flash and Flee most of the time unless they want a momentum out into something else. So that's why Lantorch is an honorable mention, even though on paper it's still a pretty good Pivot Loomian. The best Pivot Loomian in all of Loomian Legacy is your Snack. I mean, there's no other number 1. This is a top 5 Loomian in all of Loomian Legacy, and this Loomian has so much. Has Fade Away Pivot and Baffle Pivot. And when you combine that with amazing bulk and the tank ability, makes this thing one of the most overpowered tanks in all of Loomian Legacy. It sets up your wall breakers so well, because just like Luminami and Cleone, you go last, you lower the opposing Loomian speed, and your wall breaker comes in without taking any damage, adding so much momentum. And while your Snack doesn't have any health healing capabilities, it can't heal any health, so the damage it's taken is the damage it takes for the rest of the fight. Its bulk is so good because of the tank ability that it lives multiple super effective hits really well. Your Snack is one of the best bridge Loomians in all of the Loomian Legacy. And even though it has no offensive threat, it kind of doesn't need it when it's pivoting out into a devastating wall breaker. I will say though, if it is just your Snack and one Loomian left, it won't do so well. But still, the fact that it can bridge into a very powerful wall breaker very easily, especially with the Baffle ability, makes your Snack by far the best Pivot Loomian in all of Loomian Legacy. Luminami is close with its Power Napper ability, but I think Baffle Your Snack is just a little bit better. And here it is, Your Snack, the best Pivot Loomian in all of Loomian Legacy. I hope you guys enjoyed this list of me talking about the top 5 Pivot Loomians. If there are some Pivot Loomians that I missed on the list, please tell me in the comments below, because these are my opinions. Everyone's opinions are going to be different. That's going to be the end of the video, and I'll see y'all all later. Bye-bye!